Okay, now, in our last video, we locked the transparency. The transparency is affected because it's been selected. Transparency by clicking right here. Lock transparent pixels. Now again, I could go to the let's option key and let's sample this little color from the peach. That's my foreground color right now. Now I can paint with that color. And again, if I hold down the right bracket key, I can make this bigger. Now again, this is not a bad idea, but that's like that takes at least a couple of seconds to do that. Every second that you save, guys, at the end of a minute, you save 5 seconds. And of an hour, you save 12 minutes. At the end of the day, you save an hour and a half. It adds up. It adds up. It does. So how can we fill this with foreground color? Well, we learned in a previous video that we could hit Option Delete. Wrong answer. Now, if that's what you're looking for, we could fill this with plain, old, simple, opaque color. That's not what we're looking to do. So we need more choices. So the choice for this is Shift Delete. Shift Delete equals, this is the same way we did the drop shadow. Shift Delete equals Edit Fill. We can fill this with foreground color in color mode at 100% opacity and return. And there you go. Done, finish, pay me. How cool is that? How cool is that? We filled it. We kept the integrity of the pixels, meaning we kept the shadows, we kept the highlights, and everything else. We simply filled it with color mode. Now we do the same for the other. So I can select this rose. Now again, I'm not sure what layer this is in. I can drive myself nuts and go over here to see what layer it's in. Or I can simply go to my Move tool, hold down the Command key, and click. Now again, I want to lock the transparency. Okay, so let's fill it. Let's pick a different color. So I can go to, let's go to the eyedropper tool, eyedropper, and let's pick this darker green color. And now I can just hit Shift Delete and return. Boom, finished. Simple. Now, before I share with you a technique of taking these roses and putting them into different layers. So let's say I want to have a couple of greens and a couple of oranges and a couple of browns and a couple of reds, etc., etc. What you could do here, guys, is you could then take those two roses at a time as an example. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, let's select. Okay, so I'm going to select these two layers, Control key, pop-up menu, and we're going to merge layers. So now these two in the same layer. Now the same thing's possible if I go to the Move tool. I can now move those layers. Or I can Command T to transform, and I can transform those layers because they're both inside the same layer. But one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to affect the transparency. So again, lock the transparency. Or I could Command click. Either way works the same way. Now, when would I use one over the other? Here's a good example of using one over the other. If you just want to fill this with a different color, so again, let's go to the eyedropper tool, and let's pick this little color here. Now that's sort of close to the color it is, but that's incidental. So I'm going to lock the color, Shift Delete, and fill. And here's my different color rose. Now, when would I use Command clicking versus locking the transparency? Okay, well, in this particular case, I want to load the selection. So Command click loads the selection. Now, the reason I want to load the selection is I want to create a drop shadow. A drop shadow by hand from scratch, similar to how we did before with the Joker. Okay, now in order to do this, we need to create a new layer. I'm going to take this layer, move it down to the bottom, and I'm going to call this 2 Rose Shadow. Sometimes spelling helps. Okay. Now, this is the layer we want to target. This is the layer I want to be in. Okay. Now, again, if my light source is coming up here from the top left, my shadows would be down over here to the right. Now, as long as I'm in a selection tool, L for lasso tool, or M for marquee tool, or W for wand tool, any of the selection tools work. Because I just simply want to move the selection. I can do this with arrow keys, or I can just move the selection right about there. Then I want to feather the selection, similar to what we did before. So that's under select, anything about selections under the selection menu. Select, modify, modify feather, feather the selection. Let's feather this at, say, 14 pixels. Now we can go back to Shift Delete, which equals edit fill. Fill this with not foreground color, fill this with black, black multiply at 65%. And I get this. Okay, pretty cool. So there's my nice shadow. Okay, so now if I go to the move tool, I can move the shadow. See what's happening here? I'm moving the shadow. Now if you want to move the shadow with the roses again, then you hold down the Shift key to select them both, and now I can move the rose with the shadow. So maybe I decide to put the roses over here. And it's still going to keep the integrity of whatever it's on top of, because I picked blending mode of multiply. So again, let's review that. So Shift Delete, so I have something selected. So Shift Delete here. Okay, so Shift Delete and change it to black multiply 65% opacity. Now this is kind of a starting point. If you don't want that much opacity of course the opposite of transparency. If I make it 100% opaque, I'm just going to get a shade of black in here. Multiply is multiplying the background difference between the layer itself as opposed to normal. Okay, so I just want to share with you those simple concepts. All right, so we're moving right along here. Command 0 fits in the window. All right, so again, I'm showing you some very powerful techniques of how I can affect something. A simple way by saving selections, jumping to layers, affecting to select, filling in with foreground color, background color, edit fill. We'll continue this concept and understanding in Photoshop in our next video.